Hey there. Today's post is inspired by an article on boingboing.net by Jacques Vallée. Just a little intro on Jacques Vallée. I wasn't planning on doing uh, today's post on this, but it just kind of came up and it seemed kind of juicy because it's the kind of thing that's the bullseye on the type of thing that interests me. So I'm going to tell you a little about Jacques Vallée, and I'm also going to tell you his article was about crop circles, a very out there topic to most people. Which, again, though, I'm not I don't have the same potential ideas about it as he does, but at the same time, my ideas about it I think would be somewhat in line with his own thinking. And I'm also going to go through the comments because it's very instructive, actually. This is kind of one of the things I like to rant about, but my friends are, tired of my ranting because it does tend to be the same thing in this particular regard. Basically, just how people comment about stuff in complete and utter ignorance. But this thread is particularly representative of that kind of stuff. First off, it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition of a very unaccepted, as in most people consider crop circles because several people have made crop circles. Therefore, all crop circles have been made by a couple of louts with sticks and boards, right? Which is again the typical pathetic level of reasoning that most people employ when it comes to anything even slightly unusual. Not that people don't make crop circles, not that they can't even make fairly impressive ones, but anyway, I'll get to that. But first, a little bit about Jacques Vallée. Well, that's actually a little bit of preamble even on that. Is I find that when it comes to out there stuff, it's like a lot of cliches, but again, anybody who's very aware is aware of this, but most people aren't, so it's worth mentioning. Basically, anything that's not mainstream tends to be about 90% crackpots and 10% geniuses, essentially, like exceptional individuals. And the thing is, they're mixed together, and unless you are very familiar with the field, then you have really no way of separating them. And I found this to be completely true when it comes to fringe subjects like UFOs and crop circles and anything paranormal or occult or strange. There are a lot of crackpots. There are a lot of people who just have no clue whatsoever. There's some grand loons. A lot of just the great mass is basically people who are completely and utterly clueless, and they'll often have one idea or one strand of an idea, and they just stick to that, and they don't understand anything else, and they'll tend to jam it all into one thing. That's very common. But if you really get to know it and you sift it, what would surprise me even about stuff that I thought was really out there, like conspiracy type stuff, UFO type stuff. What's really fascinating is when you manage to narrow it down and you do enough research, you're like, wow, this guy's legitimate. Like all these other guys were complete nutbars. But you'll find one guy and he's like Jacques Vallée. He's a perfect example. He has a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics, a Master of Science in Astrophysics, and a PhD in Computer Science. So there's some educational credit for you. I'm just going to give you his real world stuff. He's been a venture capitalist since 1982, co-founded 4 venture capital funds, spearheaded over early stage investments in over 60 startup companies, 18 of which have become traded on public markets either through IPOs or acquisitions. He is basically extremely smart, extremely rich, extremely well connected. He is not a kook. He's not the town drunk. Essentially, if he says something, it's worth at least thinking about. Jacques Vallée, again, with regard to the esoteric, he is actually for a long time, has basically been the foremost proponent of what I consider to be the legitimate, the mostly, the most viable UFO theory, though most people aren't familiar with it because it's, again, even more out there than the conventional one. Most evidence suggests that UFO phenomena, which does happen unquestionably, most of it is very bizarre. And Jacques Vallée actually has done a ton of analysis and written tons of books on it. And he came to the same conclusion that my fellow researchers and I have come to, which is the majority. I mean, there may be a certain amount that fits under the extraterrestrial hypothesis, i.e., you see something weird in the sky or something lands, and it's an actual physical spaceship or whatever. Those are actually the minority. I'm sort of getting, this is basically going to be about a bit about crop circles, a bit about UFOs, a bit about, a bit about a lot of stuff. Just very quickly, the majority of UFO sightings are of a blazing ball of light, sometimes gigantic, sometimes having features, they can have different colors, this and that, but there are many sightings of a pseudo-technological nature, but that seems to be a cover. It seems to be something that is actually projected into the people's minds, or is a holographic projection, whatever. It's a mostly an illusion. When they're seen in their raw form, typically they are basically a blazing ball, like a plasma sphere of some sort. Though, of course, who knows what they actually are. Anyway, so Jacques Vallée, the competing hypothesis, the major competing hypothesis to the extraterrestrial hypothesis about UFOs is the extra-dimensional hypothesis. Basically, it's that UFOs are part of the overall paranormal in that they involve very bizarre stuff that seems to involve things. It's not from space. It's from somewhere else. Might have to do with Earth. But it is not little men from Mars, because none of it, as people legitimately criticize, again, the skeptics and debunkers and science people, the stuff that people report makes no sense in terms of extraterrestrials, like the people get abducted and have an abduction experience anyway, and have all these weird things done to them and painful probes and whatever. And of course, as people point out, that makes absolutely no sense, because our medicine is mostly already advanced beyond that. So anything that's actually got these amazingly powerful spacecraft, so it doesn't make any sense. And Jacques Vallée did a huge analysis of all that type of thing, and his conclusion was that the whole thing is a big show. For what purpose? Hard to say, but one way or another, I think he's correct in that one of the purposes definitely seems to be it's information. I mean, that's the thing. That's when you boil it all down. What's left is you have experiences that affect people's minds. They then, in some cases, tell people about it. But what it does is it changes people, and it adds information and changes the culture. So it's something to do with humanity's collective mind sphere, which is basically our culture. Still a lot of mystery involved, but that seems to be that, and the fact that it again is not to do with little men coming from outer space. It's more like they're coming from inner space or something. So anyway, this one, crop circles. Now, crop circles are interesting. Actually, I'll just reference the article in the comments, and I'll sort of fill you in on the various things as we go, because I have sort of a reaction to each one that does that anyway. So here in the article, just published yesterday, I guess, on boingboing.net, Jacques Vallée's theorizing about